everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-band review. Today I'll be continuing on my journey with Daniel Clowes' The Complete Eightball. This is the new paperback edition from Fantagraphics that collects facsimile editions of the first 18 issues of Eightball. We are on issue number 14, and my increasing enjoyment of the series continues on its path. The first story here, The Gold Mommy. This is pretty much just another like Clowes surreal David Lynch type of thing. I imagine that Clowes was probably like one of the biggest Twin Peaks fans in the world. I'm sure he was like an obsessive David Lynch collector. But these kind of pieces, they look lovely. They don't do much for me narratively. They just kind of feel like someone telling me a dream, which is, you know, like, okay, yeah, that's something I didn't have any access to, but I guess it was interesting to you. It's kind of the vibes I get from it. But the art keeps me engaged, especially images like this where his use of color is on full display. To be working with that kind of color palette and having it come across natural still with how toxic this all is really, really impressive. So that's always fun to watch. Oops, got to skip over that one. Had to skip a story here because it's so explicit. Again, it's Clowes turning his super critical eye onto culture instead of a specific person, which I always quite like when he does that. And this time he's talking about the erotic and homoerotic nature of different sporting games. So the homoeroticism of football, the straight eroticism of golf and baseball, things like that. And he's running it all through like a Freudian or Jungian psychoanalysis, which is an interesting take on it. So my first reaction to that story was that sports is not like a stand-in for sexuality. It's a stand-in for war and strategy and tactics. But Clowes is so convincing with his interpretations that it's like, yeah, that's a fair interpretation of sporting. And you combine that with the war outlook, and I think you've got exactly why sports are so compelling, because they're that exact right mix between war and sexuality, or struggle and working together. I think maybe that's an even more general way to put it. This balance that we're trying to seek in society, really, of love and struggle, that you don't just give in to somebody. You stand up for yourself, but there's also like a loving component to that. So I think maybe a more forgiving, like positive look on it is that interpretation. That sports are kind of a representation of the peak between struggle and collaboration, and that yes, that most definitely has a sexual component to it. So I think as with most of these kind of cultural critiques, they're a little short-sighted and only take kind of one of the many lenses that you can take on the thing. But it's very entertaining, it's very funny, and I think it's 100% spot on. And kind of shows me why I never really responded to sports in general. Only mixed martial arts, which obviously has its homoerotic or sexual element, but I think is the purest expression of what I just talked about the collaboration and struggle against another human being. So that story is really interesting to me. It's a little short one. It's really funny. I can't even show it because it's so explicit. Then we get into Ghost World again, and I'm falling more and more in love with just his representation of the characters. I think they're really accurate and well observed, especially like the dialogue here where Enid has called up Becky and is telling her about a trip to the porno store that she did with her friend, and she's like, I ran into him at the shitty record store where there's no price on anything, and then we walked around for a while and we were standing on like this totally random corner talking, and just that bold totally random, I can just hear her voice so well. Obviously as a kid who was a teenager during the 90s in California, this is like, pretty familiar characters to me. It feels very accurate, and still honestly sounds like a lot of the people that I know from California, a lot of my students and stuff. So it's a very good representation of like listless youth, and especially listless youth of the 90s, who these bored like outsider girls trying to find their way in life. And they think they know a lot, but they're not. It's kind of like, I think this is where Clowes is finding out a bit about himself as well. And then Enid gives a kind of chat about her. Well, she tells the story of losing her virginity, and I feel like that's actually handled pretty sensitively. It's not. It's definitely not something she enjoyed. She's kind of checked out for it, but it was like, totally consensual and stuff as well. The thing there was that the social pressures were in place causing it. Um, so I think that's really interesting, and I like how he deals with it. I'd be curious to hear what like a female readership thinks, but if my memory serves, he had a pretty like fierce and committed female readership that responded to these characters. So I'm assuming it must have come across accurate to them. So, anyways, really enjoying Ghost World. It's kind of what I expected. My memory of it's matching that pretty well, but a lot of the details I didn't remember, so that's nice filling those back in. Then we go back to Dan Pussy, and we see the death of Dan Pussy, and we're just getting like kind of a summary of his career. I quite like that there's this scene in here where someone's trying to get him to do a CD romic, and I remember that in like 94, 95 I had got a couple of those from my uncle that he must have picked up. He had a press pass, and so he would go to conventions and just get stuff for free as a press person. And when I started going with him when I was like 13 or 14, then I would get to go as well. So it might have been something that I actually picked up at an early San Diego, not Comic Con, but San Diego Comic Expo. It was like a retailer expo the 2 days before the con that he would get me into. So I might have grabbed it there, but it was a comic on a CD-ROM, and like you could click panels and there would be animations and like 3D animation. It all looked like it was rendered by a computer. It was some weird like kung fu movie type of thing. I don't know, but that's funny. That was supposed to be like the future of comics for a minute, and it obviously didn't pan out. So it's funny that he was making this during that moment in time. And then you get this here where Dan Pussy is now like the mega millionaire guy, and he's welcoming in I would say probably like the Jack Kirby character, and the Jack Kirby-ish characters like, man, you're ripping off my drawings. How are you making this much money? Like, you live in a house like this from drawing comics. And then it's like, well, you've ripped me off and you're making a bunch of money. And so it's that same thing about appropriation that I was talking about, I believe, in the previous issue to this. And then right here, he acknowledges Pussy's like, no, I didn't swipe it from you, but it's pretty likely that I swiped it from a guy who swiped it from you. And the Jack Kirby standing character is like, whatever, I probably swiped it from so-and-so in the first place. So it acknowledges this history of like, look, this is a deadline-based medium, and people cheat to make things happen, and that's just well known. So that's interesting. And when I was reading this takedown of sports in this issue, I was thinking, you know what? I'd really like to see this kind of larger view takedown of comics. I feel like Clowes is too embedded in comics, so he can't see like that Freudian, Jungian, like large scale interpretation of the comics. He's more focused on like the small stereotypes. And so I was thinking, man, I would really like to see Clowes do this comics. And I was like, wait a second, I've been complaining about, like mentally I was thinking that while I was reading this. Like, oh, I'd really like to see Clowes do this, but about the comics industry. And it's like, wait, every time he does that, I complain about it. And I'm not quite sure why, but I think it's the fact that he's like more embedded in it. He's not looking at it from the outside. That could be the difference there. But here he does take on like a bigger like look at just the cycles of popularity and how the industry works and stuff like that. And it's a little bit less nasty to like the comic nerd kind of stereotype that's there. And then here you get, so I was initially thinking that Pussy was supposed to represent like the Image era, but he was obviously intended to represent the era before the Image era, because then you get this guy coming with like Mutilators #1, and then he starts taking pot shots at the industry at the time, where everyone keeps their stuff in bags, they don't read their books, people blow up and get on national television. So he has that, and then you get like the Image group, I couldn't do it without my crew, and then Pussy has been replaced by the Image crew. And then you take a jump to the future, and you have this Dr. Infinity, which is supposed to be like the Stan Lee character, and this Richard Nixon robot here is explaining like the eccentric genius of Dr. Infinity and basically giving him all the credit for other people's work, which we know is a common complaint against Stan Lee. And then you get just old Dan Pussy in the nursing home and some other people who are enjoying drawing and throwing away comics. So I like this one bigger because it is like what I was thinking about while I was reading the baseball thing applied to comics, this bigger, more structural look. Here in the ads, I noticed in the last 2 issues he's been advertising a Lloyd Llewellyn collection, and it's like, this is the only printing of it there will ever be. Send us the money. There will be no paperback edition of this book. There's only less than 1,000 of these left. And I wonder if he stayed true to that or if there have been further Lloyd Llewellyn releases. If people could tell me how many versions of Lloyd Llewellyn are out there, that'd be great. Because I've never read that stuff, so I probably need to get it. And then on the back, we have the Sensual Santa, which is a very creepy, like Dutch-looking man who's in his wife beater and is just imposing unwanted sensuality on people. And even naked humping on this woman makes sure to point out that it isn't about sex. Sensuality is not a naughty word. But then you get this one here where he's like got these 2 naked kids over his lap massaging their back. And that just made me think of the big brouhaha right now going on about Bastien Vivez's art. By the time this video comes out, that will be long over and no one will remember it. And Vivez will be back to being uncanceled, I'm sure. But currently, with Angloom going on and the art show of Vivez's work, and anyone who watches the channel knows I'm a huge fan of Vivez, he's getting plastered right now for something that I've actually mentioned in my reviews of his work, that there seems to be this undercurrent of interest in children's sexuality in his work that is striking me as teetering the line towards problematic. Apparently there's some things that haven't been translated that are more problematic, but everything I've seen has been intended like this for humor. Apparently he's also made some as far as I can tell, comments that are intended to be humorous but that have pissed people off. So it just, like, when you see a current creator, especially a creator like Vivez, who means a lot to me, who I believe is a really compelling cartoonist that I just love his work and will run out of my way to get it, kind of put through the ringer like that. And then you see someone like Clowes, who's so celebrated, who's done, he doesn't have as ongoing of a history of it as Vivez, or someone like Nagabe, who me and Sean have talked about being even more problematic in my opinion. But it's just interesting. It's like Clowes gets a pass, Crumb gets a pass, but more modern creators don't. I don't know. It's just this weird state that our world is in right now. So it's interesting to see that. Like, I don't need this. I get it. Clowes sat down one day and just had a stupid idea. Like, I just did a comic like that last night just for fun. And once you've done it and you think it looks nice and it's funny, you want to put it out there. But this type of, like, just creepy thing is less interesting to me, but it's fun. So anyways, that's 8-Ball number 14. We're on to number 15. We only have a few issues left, 4 issues left, I think. And then there's some little insert in here that I see falling out now as I work my way back in the book, and it's not being held together by gravity. So I look forward to whatever this is as well. It looks like an instruction manual, maybe. So anyways, that's issue number 14. Still increasingly enjoying it. I really see Clowes maturing a lot, and I see him realizing what his powers are and how he can best use them, and I really appreciate that. So thanks for following along with me as I continue this journey. If you appreciate what we're doing here on the channel, there's 2 ways to support us. The first one is through our Patreon. There's a couple different tiers of interaction, voting, and exclusive content that you can get on there. Any money that we make on there, we like to turn back around, and it helps us pay for the books that we review, so we try and turn that money right back into the community. And then the best way that you can support the mission of Living the Line is to support what Sean's doing with Living the Line Publishing. So we'll take a look at a couple of the books that you could get from Sean now. The Exile by Eric Creek is a gorgeously illustrated Viking saga of revenge. Eric Creek calls it his Viking Western. It's about a guy who's been away on the warpath and is returning home to some family troubles that have to be resolved. And this is told in just this amazing, like, kind of 3-color art style that looks like old woodblock cuts or something. It's absolutely gorgeous book that you've got to pick up. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell And then you get them.